It is absolutely crucial which helicopter you choose to fly in. If you choose the wrong helicopter, it may make your journey much more difficult. I won't make you stick around for the whole video, and I will tell you the answer right now. You should do your training in a Robinson helicopter. Now, I do recommend that you stick around. I'll break down my reasons why, but before we get into it, smash that like button. It really helps get out aviation content to the rest of the world, and let's dive into it. Breaking down why I said that. If you want to be a commercial helicopter pilot, you should absolutely do your training in a Robinson helicopter. Yes, the other helicopters on the market are great in their own capacities, but Robinson helicopters are overall the one you should pick. The 4 reasons why you should do your training in a Robinson helicopter is number 1, they are far more common than any other helicopter. Yes, there are other helicopters on the market that can technically get you to the same spot, but because Robinson helicopters are far more common, it's going to be a lot easier. Number 2, if something happens, you can go somewhere else and start your training or start your career with that Robinson background. Number 3 is the flight characteristics and learning how to fly on a Robinson platform. And 4, because you're flying Robinsons, it's going to be less hassle. And to preface these 4 points, if you were just a private pilot or you just want to get your commercial rating, but you don't actually want to work in the field of being a commercial helicopter pilot, it doesn't really matter which helicopter you choose to fly because essentially you're doing it just for the fun and just for the recreation of flying. But if you want to be a commercial pilot and you're starting from zero and you want to work in the industry, these are the 4 reasons why you should choose to fly the Robinson platform. Point number 1, they're by far the most common helicopter along multiple different categories. What are those categories? 1, flight schools. A lot of flight schools use them. The vast majority of flight schools that I have seen use Robinson helicopters. 2, personal owners. A lot of personal owners use Robinson helicopters. 3, police and law enforcement. 4, radio, TV, electronic news gathering as a whole. 5, crop dusting. 6, tours, and the list goes on and on. If you do your training on the Robinson platform and get all your experience in that, you can walk yourself into these fields super easily. Even if you do your training in the 22, stepping up into the 44, it's not that big of a shift. So you can set yourself up for success for all these different careers, especially tours. That's a common progression. Instruction, that's a common progression. Because a lot of operators use the Robinson platform, it makes a ton of sense to do your training in that. And that leads me into point 2. You can go most places. What do I mean by that? Well, when you graduate flight school, you can either work at your school or you can go to another school. For me, from where I graduated to where I worked right after was not the exact same school, which has its pros and cons. I'm gonna give you 2 examples here. The first example is, let's say you do 200 hours, you get your CFI in the Cabri G2. It's a wonderful aircraft, we're gonna talk about it, but let's say you do 200 hours in the Cabri G2. You maybe were promised that you'd be hired as a flight instructor at the end of your training. Well, then you get to the end of the training and the school is kind of slowed down and they don't need an instructor and they can't hire you right now. Well, you look for jobs around, maybe you'll find a Cabri instructor job. You're much more likely to find a Robinson instructor job, and that's the truth about it. Example number 2, let's say you do 200 hours in the Cabri, you get your commercial pilot's license, and you want to bypass the instructor role and you want to go do just commercial work. Well, if you do all of your training in the Cabri and then maybe you want to go be a tour operator and someone happens to pick you up at 200 hours, going from the Cabri to the Robinson R44 is going to be much more difficult than going from the R22, the Robinson R22, into the R44. Maybe you want to go directly into crop dusting or agriculture. Once again, going from the 22 is going to be much easier going into the 44 than it is the Cabri going in to the 44. The same thing goes for the Schweitzer or the Instrom. I'm not hating on any of them, and like I said, they are all great for their own purposes, but you as a want-to-be commercial pilot, it makes a lot of sense to just stick with Robinson because it's so massive, because it's operated so commonly along so many different operators, it just makes sense. And conversely, if you don't, it's going to be a lot more difficult. So let's say you get to the end of your training and they do hire you for a while and you get to 200, 300, 400, maybe 500 hours. It's still going to be easier with a Robinson background to switch into some of these more advanced jobs than it is from the Cabri background. All right, the next point I'm going to make is flight characteristics and how they actually fly. There are 2 that are unlike the rest. Rotorway, these are typically home-built helicopters, and Cabri. These both have clockwise rotating rotor systems versus Literally everything else, at least in America, has a counterclockwise rotating rotor system. Robinson, Enstrom, Schweitzer, Sikorsky, Bell, MD from MD Helicopters, MD 500. They all have counterclockwise rotating rotor systems. It logically makes sense that if you are an American pilot, to do your training in the Robinson with a counterclockwise rotating rotor system, to step up into the Bell or the Sikorsky or the MD 500 versus the Cabri, which has a clockwise rotating rotor system, to then have to make that shift. And I'm not saying that that shift is difficult. I've never personally done it. I've only worked with counterclockwise rotating rotor systems, but it just makes sense and you're putting less hassle on yourself. And that is point 4, less hassle. And it being less hassle is so important. It's so much easier to find an instructor. It's so much easier to find a school. It's going to be easier to step up onto different platforms. If you decide to go all the way and get your instructor rating or your CFII, if you do that in the Cabri, you literally can't teach in the R44. You have to have special certifications under the SFAR 73 requirements to teach in the 22 or the 44, and that limits the job completely. Conversely, if I do all my training in the 44, I can go jump in the Cabri and there's no special regulations. I'm gonna have to do about 5 hours of training. However, there is no specific mandate like there is for the Robinson helicopters. And I get it, the Cabri is cool. It's got 3 blades, so you can't get into mass bumping. But if you fly the 22 or the 44 within its envelope and within how it's designed to be flown, you're not going to get into mass bumping. And yeah, the Cabri is a beautiful helicopter and I would love to get to fly one. The avionics are cool, it's modern, but you as a student pilot going to be a commercial pilot, you don't need that luxury, right? You just need to get the training, get the ratings, understand how things work, and you can do that in the Robinson, and it's gonna make your life so much easier, so much less of a hassle versus, yeah, maybe you've got nice avionics and it's cool and you get to fly the newest helicopter, but what's the point of that? If you get all your ratings and you work hard, you're gonna be flying much cooler aircraft than the Robinson or the Cabri. You're gonna be flying the top of the line aircraft that have the cool glass cockpit, that have the nice interior. So it makes sense to make your life as hassle-free, and I think that's through the Robinson platform. Now, if you made it this far in the video, you must have enjoyed it, so please smash that like button. I'd love to get this content out to everyone. Leave your comments down below. Some of you guys are gonna have a heated argument with me about this, and this is just my personal beliefs. I think everything I said is true. If you disagree, I'd love to hear about it. Hit that like button, like I said, subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the little bell notification so you get notified every time I post a new video, and I'll see you guys on the next one.